The Bible. It's a collection of ancient texts, prophecies, poetry, history, and letters. It holds stories of kings, shepherds, wars, and miracles. But for many, the Bible remains an unopened mystery. Here at The Bible Explained, we're not just reading verses, we're exploring the cultural bedrock and the dramatic narrative woven through its 66 books. Hit that subscribe button and let the journey begin.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take the articles, research, and sources you've given us and, well, turn some pretty dense history and theology into insights that are clear and powerful.
And today, we are plunging into one of the most intense family dramas ever recorded.
I mean, it's high stakes for sure. We're talking about Isaac and Ishmael, Genesis 21. It's a story that just throws everything at you. Joy, jealousy, anguish, and a really brutal expulsion into the desert, all in one scene.
It's such a pivotal deep dive because this story, it doesn't just, document a family feud. It ends up defining the future for three major world religions.
That's the mission today, right? To get past the surface level drama.
Exactly. We want to understand the deeper things at play. The theological split between a unique covenant and a massive blessing.
Yeah.
The realities of inheritance law back then. And of course, the legacy of this split across Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions. We really need to know why it had to happen this way.
And to get to the why, we have to start with the problem. I mean, the root of all this. God promised Abraham and Sarah a son, the heir, but they waited 10 years, 10 agonizing years.
And nothing happened. Sarah was still barren, so their patience it ran out.
And when human patience runs out, human custom tends to step in.
That's it, exactly. Sarah, or Sarai at the time, she goes for the culturally accepted plan B. She gives her Egyptian maidservant, Hagar, to Abram to have a child for her. Right. This was, a totally normal way of getting an heir in that culture.
And the result was Ishmael, born when Abraham was 86. He was the child of human effort, human ingenuity, the child of the flesh, as it's often called.
And that setup, right from the start, it just injects this conflict into the family that can't be resolved.
Why not?
Because Ishmael had every legal right to be the main heir. But the divine plan, it called for a completely different kind of birth.
Which brings us to that fulfillment 14 years later. Genesis 21 opens with just pure supernatural triumph, the birth of Isaac.
And the text is so careful with its language here. It says the Lord was gracious to Sarah and did exactly what he had promised. And it even says, at the very time God had promised him.
And you mentioned a specific Hebrew verb is used there, pakwad.
Yes, pakwad. And it's more than just visiting. It implies active, gracious intervention. It's not passive at all. It's like God took personal oversight of Sarah's situation and acted to make it happen.
So Isaac's birth wasn't just luck, it was a scheduled miracle.
Right on schedule. It was God stepping in.
And the whole experience is wrapped in this idea of joy, right? I mean, Isaac's name itself means he laughs.
Yes, and Sarah's reaction is the punchline. She says, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. Think about the contrast.
Yeah, she had laughed before, but it was out of doubt. She was 90 years old. Abraham laughed too.
And now all that skepticism is transformed into pure, impossible joy. It's an amazing moment.
But that joy, it doesn't last very long. The sources tell us the next big event is the weaning feast. So Isaac is maybe 2 or 3 years old. And this was a huge public party.
A huge deal. It was a public declaration establishing Isaac as the legitimate heir. And you have to remember, Ishmael, Abraham's first son, is about 16 at this point.
16. So he's been the heir apparent for over a decade. He sees this feast, this whole celebration for his little brother, and the tension just boils over.
It does. Sarah sees Ishmael doing something the text calls sahak or sachak.
Which is the root of Isaac's name, laughter. So why is this the thing that gets him kicked out? He was just laughing.
Well, this is where the specific grammar is so important. The way the verb is used here, in this intensive form, it completely changes the meaning. It's not innocent playing or laughing.
It's something else.
It's malicious. It means deliberate mockery, ridicule, an insulting jest. It wasn't just kids roughhousing. It was an act meant to dishonor Isaac's status.
It's the difference between a playful joke and a public, calculated insult.
Precisely. And centuries later, the Apostle Paul confirms this in Galatians. He calls what Ishmael did persecution. So Sarah saw a direct attack on the son of the promise. And that's what triggers her unbelievably fierce demand.
Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. I mean, to our ears, that sounds so cruel, ruthless even.
It does. But the sources show she was acting out of legal necessity. This is the key insight of this whole deep dive. She's preserving the divine plan by using the law of the land.
What law? Well, look where Abraham came from, Mesopotamia. Legal texts like the Code of Hammurabi were very clear. If a free man has a son with a slave woman, that son did have a legal right to inherit property.
Wow, wait, so Ishmael wasn't just some kid on the side. Legally, he was a co-heir.
He was a fully legitimate co-heir. If he stayed, he had a legal claim that could have split the family's inheritance or, even worse, derailed the entire covenant promise tied to the land.
So her demand, as heartbreaking as it is, was actually a legal move to secure Isaac's claim.
It was a necessary strategic move, but Abraham, he's devastated. The text says he was distressed greatly. This was his son. He'd raised him for 16 years.
And this is where the story shifts from law to theology. Because Abraham loves his son, but God steps in directly. He overrides Abraham's feelings. God says, do not be so distressed. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you.
And then comes the core reason.
The core distinction. It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned.
This is it. The separation of the covenant from the blessing.
That's it. Isaac, the son of grace, gets the everlasting covenant, the messianic line, the land, all of salvation history. Ishmael, the son of natural human effort, does not get the covenant. Grace itself demanded the separation.
But the story is careful not to just discard Ishmael. Right after that harsh decree, there's this incredible promise of a blessing for him.
Absolutely. God tells Abraham, I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring. He promises to make him fruitful, multiply him, give him 12 princes, a great nation.
So Ishmael gets this massive national destiny, just not the specific torch of the covenant.
A powerful blessing, but not the covenant. They're distinct.
So Abraham agrees. He sends Hagar and Ishmael out into the wilderness of Beersheba, just some bread and a flask of water. This is Hagar's second exile.
And the desperation is just. You can feel it. They're wandering, the water runs out, Hagar collapses. She puts the boy under a bush and walks away because she can't bear to watch him die. It's a moment of total human despair.
And at that lowest point, Ishmael's name, God hears, becomes his reality.
Exactly. The angel of God calls out, God heard the boy crying. His name is his salvation. God confirms the promise of a great nation again, and then miraculously opened her eyes and she saw a well of water.
The Zamzam well in the Islamic tradition.
That's the tradition, yes. His survival and the future of his entire lineage, it all rests on that one moment of divine intervention, a life-saving blessing.
And his identity is also shaped by that famous prophecy about his character, a wild donkey of a man.
Which is such a powerful Hebrew metaphor. It's about the wild ass of the Arabian desert. It means fierce independence, an untamed spirit, total nomadic freedom. It's a perfect description of the Bedouin Arabs, historically.
And that freedom comes with, well, a pretty turbulent nature. It does. The prophecy is clear. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. It foresees constant conflict. But, and this is crucial, it also says he will dwell in the presence of all his brethren. So he maintains his independence, his sovereignty.
He carves out his own place through his own strength.
And we know this was fulfilled. The sources list his 12 sons, Nebaioth, Kedar, Duma, Tema, who become 12 tribal rulers. They build this powerful confederacy all across the northern Arabian Peninsula.
And these weren't just some small tribes. They were major nomadic nations. We even have records of them, Assyrian inscriptions. The blessing was absolutely fulfilled. They created a vast, enduring presence.
And then they show up again in the main covenant story in this really surprising way.
This is the aha moment you want to hold on to. In the story of Joseph, you know, when his brothers sell him into slavery, the caravan that buys him and takes him to Egypt, they're identified as Ishmaelite merchants.
Wait, really? So the covenant line, the survival of Isaac's descendants, depended on the descendants of the son who was expelled.
Exactly. The Ishmaelites become the critical link, the conduit that gets the covenant family to Egypt, where they survive the famine and grow into a nation. God uses the line of Ishmael to advance the sacred history of Isaac.
Wow. They remain interconnected despite the theological split.
Deeply interconnected.
So shifting gears a bit, this ancient split has had massive echoes and interpretations across different faiths. For Christians, the sources point to Paul's take in Galatians.
Right. Paul uses the story as a powerful allegory. He says Hagar and Ishmael represent the bondage of the Old Covenant, the law from Mount Sinai, all of human effort.
And Sarah and Isaac.
They represent freedom, the promise, divine grace. For Paul, the whole story is a theological argument that spiritual inheritance comes through faith alone, not by works or legal merit.
And what about Jewish tradition? There are some interesting views there too, especially about Hagar.
There are. Some rabbinical sources actually say she was Pharaoh's daughter, given to Sarah as a princess, not just a servant. There's even a tradition that identifies her with Keturah, Abraham's wife after Sarah died.
Implying a final reconciliation.
A final, intimate family reconciliation. Other views are a bit harsher, suggesting she might have briefly relapsed into idolatry in the desert.
And the Islamic narrative, of course, offers a completely distinct framework. Hagar and Ishmael are central prophetic figures.
Totally central. In Islamic tradition, Hajar is often seen as a princess or a wife, not a slave.
Yeah.
And crucially, their move to Mecca wasn't an expulsion by Sarah. It was a direct command from God to Abraham, a divine mission.
So the whole thing is framed by obedience to God.
Yes. And that desperate search for water we talked about, that becomes a core ritual. The Sa'i, yeah. Hajar's desperate running between the hills of Safa and Marwa, leading to the Zamzam well, is reenacted during the Hajj pilgrimage today. And Ishmael, as the firstborn, is revered as a prophet and the forefather of Muhammad.
It is just powerful to see how this one family split is still referenced so often today. You hear it cited as the sort of theological seed of the Arab-Israeli narrative.
It carries enormous modern weight.
Yeah.
And the sources also show it being used in all sorts of modern social debates.
Yeah.
Hagar's forced motherhood comes up in discussions about surrogacy. African-American feminist scholars have compared her experience as an Egyptian slave to the history of slavery in the Americas. It's an incredibly resonant text. So as we wrap this up, the core tension is this. The expulsion was a necessary, divinely ordered separation to protect the unique covenant line through Isaac. But that necessity never erased the incredible blessing and preservation promised to Ishmael. Both of Abraham's sons became great nations. One held the covenant, but the other received the promise of national greatness.
And despite that required separation, the deep family bond wasn't totally severed. There's that final, poignant act of reconciliation. Isaac and Ishmael come together to bury their father, Abraham.
Standing side by side, the kinship endured. And that quiet moment of unity, it sort of sets the stage for a prophetic hope. The prophet Isaiah looks far into the future and sees a time when Ishmaelite tribes, Nebaioth and Kedar, will actually bring offerings to God.
Suggesting a spiritual inclusion, a future reconciliation beyond that ancient split.
Exactly.
The story begins with necessary separation and conflict, but the prophets seem to anticipate a final unity. How does this ultimate hope for spiritual inclusion across these divided lineages reframe our understanding of the deeply entrenched conflicts we witness in the world today? Something to think about as you process this deep dive.
The Bible isn't just a history book. It's a living, challenging text. As you reflect on what we covered today regarding this topic, consider how this new context changes your reading of the verses. If you appreciated this breakdown, sharing it with just one friend who struggles with understanding the Bible is the best way you can support the channel. Subscribe for more, click here for your next explanation, and never stop seeking clarity. Until next time.